We are part of the Fired Up Sports Network of shows. Please check out other Fired Up Sports Network podcasts like the P-Lot Pod, Water Cooler Talk, Bell Smashers, Philly Sports Love and Pain, Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles!
Swing of the miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup for the lead. Yes! Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Well, good morning. Talking all things Phillies this morning on Drunk on Broad. Eric, it's we didn't know how the last time we met when this season was kind of like felt like it might be hitting the skids, and dare I say we've had enough to say that they're back. The vibes are back. You had a little bit of a funky start to this Mets series on Friday night. But you had a get right game last night. You had a lot of people, contribute to, I guess what you would call in a game where Harper homers twice. It's the Cal Stevenson game. It's nice to see them back in a place where you feel like even with the injuries, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you feel like this team's kind of getting right, and they're still going to come out of this Mets series still at least 7 games up on the closest division, which surprisingly is not the Braves, is now the Mets, and the Mets are hot. But they're going to look to take care of business. But it's been an interesting couple of weeks, but it's good to have the good vibes back.
Yeah, last time we talked, things were not necessarily in the best spot. I think it was probably one of our more negative shows that we've had since working together, and things are definitely looking up. And I think we talked about it. Obviously there was frustration, but we knew they were going to kind of come back and bounce out of it, right? I mean, the offense has too many pieces to be bad for a way too long period of time, right? I mean, they're going to go through slumps, and that's what we talked about. But Friday night, obviously, it was a big series. Friday night, I think, was kind of a bit of an anomaly. I mean, they hit three-run home runs. That's kind of rare to have a team do that. The offense was just kind of non-existent. Realistically, I mean, the offense yesterday was a little bit scary in the beginning of the game until we see Bryce finally start to get some of his power back. And realistically, yesterday, I think the hero of yesterday's game, while Cal Stevenson and Bryce Harper put the runs on the board, I think you got to look at the Phillies bullpen, and including one certain individual who, I will be the first to admit I kind of wanted to see no more of, but Taijuan Walker shut things down when he had to, and then the rest of the bullpen, I kind of trusted the rest of the guys that were coming in anyway. But it was really encouraging to see him actually have, a good performance. Considering I don't know if we've seen any of that from him so far this season.
This is one where I will own it and say I was the first person to say I don't need to ever see Taijuan Walker again, and I'm glad to be wrong. Since then, he's gotten an opportunity to be in a couple of tough spots, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was another appearance like this where things were really funky with the fifth starter. Was it the game in Toronto? Maybe it was a game there. There was a game where
so many of them I can't.
it was a fifth starter game. It was the Tyler Phillips game in Toronto where he gave up like 6 in the first. And Taijuan Walker came in and kind of held it down. And that was the game they actually came back.
Right. That was the crazy game.
Won.
Yes, that really high scoring one. Yeah.
right? Like this is if this is his role, and it seems like he's kind of just embraced this. Like this is gonna be my contribution to helping this team get to the playoffs. Is to be able to come in when things get funky early, come in and shut it down. And he pitched great last night and really came in and gave this team an opportunity to breathe and really get a chance to kind of like settle itself. You get the Harper home run early. Comes back, in another at bat, and crushes one that's like 15 rows deep. And at that you feel like all the momentum switches. Even though, like I was listening when I was listening to the TV broadcast, they're talking about like, yeah, it's 4-0, but it feels like 100-0. Like coming off the game the night before where going into like the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, I think they only had like maybe 2 hits. It's it was a really, really interesting game to watch last night because you've seen them in certain spots have to really battle through some really adverse starts, and some of them from starters that you wouldn't expect. Like Nola has not been bad, but last night it looked bad. And it got funky early. But you look at the way that they're able to start kind of battling through this adversity. This is the kind of stuff that's going to help them in the playoffs. And they're going to get guys back. They're going to get the guys that are not healthy and not playing right now. They're going to get back. And I think what people have to realize is that in the playoffs, this is not you're not going to see the juggling of the lineup. You're going to see the same guys every day. And I think when you look at the Phillies' best lineup and you put them up against the other teams in the National League, I think the only team that I would say would really battle your lineup for lineup is probably the Dodgers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this lineup obviously has its funky, slumps and everything like that. Or it'll be one of those games like yesterday or in Friday where they don't decide to start hitting until later. I mean, I think part of that is credit to the Mets starting staff. Like both starters kind of shut down the Phillies, and all the runs were coming off of their bullpen. But yeah, their lineup when it's healthy, on paper at least anyway, I think rivals just about anyone. I mean, there's a couple guys that you want to make sure you get, just like Bryson Stott, for example. You just want to see him get right. He keeps showing glimpses of it, but then he goes back and kind of like, is popping up that first pitch, or there's just like frustrating parts there. But yeah, I mean, in a playoff series, you're right. They're not going to juggle the lineup around as much. You might have a little bit of fluctuation out in left and center field, depending on the handedness of the pitcher. But, in the postseason, teams and managers are so much more apt to go to the bullpen early. So it's like, okay, you're going to be juggling some things around probably anyway. So, it's something that this team, I think, is equipped to do, especially once they'll get Bohm and Sosa back.
Right.
But speaking of the Dodgers, like the Braves are kind of doing us a little bit of a solid right now in terms of
they are.
That first and second seed there. They've kind of been manhandling the Dodgers out there, or I guess they're in Atlanta this series. But it's been kind of good to see because we have a tough schedule. I mean, the Mets obviously, going into the season, I didn't really think much of them, but they've kind of put a couple stretches together where they're maybe a little more respectable than I thought. I'm just torn because I hate the Braves and Mets. And it's one of those things where I've hated the Braves more recently just because they've actually been good. But I think I still hate the Mets more. Like, and here's an example, right? Like, Friday night, you have Lindor basically overruns second base because he doesn't slide and hurts himself too. Like, that you can't have a team be as stupid as this Mets team. And then Iglesias yesterday doesn't slide in a second and gets tagged out because he takes his foot off the bag. I'm like, it's comical in a way, but it just makes me they're just such a dumb baseball team. I really hope we bury them today and bury them next weekend because we have that Brewers series in the middle, which is that's definitely the biggest series that the Phillies have left. Probably.
I was gonna say of the series of the things that they have left. Right, they're gonna play today, and then they'll play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Milwaukee, and then they'll play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in New York. Um, the magic number at this point to clinch the division is 7. They're still going to, even when they clinch the division, they're still going to have that overall National League standing to play for. And I think getting one of those first 2 spots at this point is paramount to be able to get the home field advantage, which we've seen in the most recent playoff runs. The environment of being able to play at home and be able to start the series at home is going to be one that I don't think people underestimate. And I think people around baseball know what type of environment that's like to come into. And especially if you're going to play, teams like if you're going to play, for instance, if you're going to play Milwaukee, if you're going to play LA, having them have to fly, west to east to start the series, and then to fly back to even just for the simple fact that you're going to save yourself one of those flights, and what that does on your body, I think that's going to be huge, especially in the playoffs. But to look at this upcoming week's going to be 7. You're going to play. I mean, they're going to play by the time they're done this stretch. Their next off day, like they didn't play Thursday the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
Their next off day is not until the 26th.
Yeah, it's a long stretch.
They got a long stretch where they're going to play. And this is not a math pod, but I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 straight days.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot at the end of the season, especially when you've had the inconsistency in their pitching staff. I know it's a lot of conversation with Ranger Suarez, right? The velo is down. He's getting hit a little bit more than I think people would like. The conversation about, is he your 4th starter in a playoff series? Does Christopher Sanchez, does he bump up to that 3rd slot? What just kind of putting this stuff aside right now and looking ahead at, like, if you're looking at the pitching staff right now, and what do you, how do you line those guys up? Because if you go 1 through 4, you go right, left. Mm-hmm. Is there an inkling to potentially mix it up and go and kind of alternate right, left?
So in a postseason series, I'm a firm believer of you just got to put your best guys out there, regardless of the other handedness. And I think, in especially the division series, I think you hit it exactly right. I think at this point, just from a trust standpoint, right? Obviously, Wheeler's your number 1. There's no debating that. Nola had a shaky start Friday, but I still trust him. He's a workhorse. Sanchez, I kind of like this season just because, his innings are, way over what they usually are. I keep waiting for the drop off for him, and it's just like not happening. I hope I don't, knock on wood here.
Yeah.
But, he's been really impressive, and he like what he's able to change between last year and this year. Not that he was even bad last year, but he has just been like a top pitcher this year. He's so good. So I think you'd move him to 3, especially given the fact that Ranger's velocity is down. Then you can pitch Ranger out of the pen, and he can kind of turn it up a little bit, and in an inning or 2, rather than having to try to give the team 5 or 6. So I think that's the move. Now, when you get into a league championship series or the World Series, you're going to need 4 starters, and I think you have to go Ranger, right? I mean, there's no one else. We've tried how many 5th starters this year, and seemingly none of them are good. So, a couple of them had good starts, but I think, Allard, I think, made it the longest, but he got exposed yesterday with the walks and all that stuff. So I think you have to go back to Ranger and just hope to God that his arm's okay. And hopefully if he gets a little bit of a rest in a division series, that'll help bring up the velocity a little bit.
Yeah, I think the idea that if he's going to be in those, when those series start to go 7 games, right? If he's your 4th starter, I think by the time game 6 and 7 roll around, he can be the guy like in the NLCS a couple years ago, where he was the guy coming out to close the game out. Like that could potentially be. I know you've got Estevez. I know you've got Hoffman. You've got Strom. You've got Alvarado. So the back end of your bullpen is, but I think the ability to be able to put another arm like that at the back end, and I think in a playoff series, his demeanor means so much.
Yep.
The way that he handles himself, and I think about Eric, a play yesterday, the play where Estevez gets the ball hit back to him, and the awkward throw over to first was like, it reminded me of like your friend in middle school when you're playing a game and like he's not the worst athlete, but he's not the best athlete. And when he goes to throw the ball and it's just this like awkward knuckleball over to like whoever's, and then I compare that to like Suarez.
Yeah.
Where like he picks it up and it's almost like he's like there's no one else there. And he's like, I really just could care less. And it's just, I'm going to throw you like a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. And like that, to me, you can't put a price tag on that because I believe it or not, that I trust in those big moments more than anything. Because in those moments, the last thing you want is a guy that's unsure and who could potentially make a nervous mistake rather than a guy who's just like, doesn't have an air of nervousness in his bones.
Yeah, I totally agree with that about Ranger. But going back to what you said about the Estevez throw, I don't understand. It's like one of the funniest things in baseball to me, how you like every MLB pitcher has is one of the best arms in the world, right? Like there's no debating it. That's why they're there. Yet they always look like they've never thrown a ball before when they throw it off the mound. Like Ranger's the only one. Like I'm like, dude, you can throw you hit 95 and you throw like you said, like an awkward sixth grader over to first base. And then it's like you have half these guys will underhand from the mound. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You guys have like your job is literally to throw hard and throw accurately, and you're afraid to do it to go to first base. It's just the funniest thing in baseball to me to watch that. But no, you're right. I mean, Ranger is like he's different in that regard, right? Like he's the only one I think he's one of the few pitchers who actually looks cool fielding his position, and I trust him doing it, right? I mean, he's shown that he's one of the best fielding pitchers in baseball, and I think one of the only reasons he hasn't won a Gold Glove is because he doesn't meet the innings requirements because injuries or things like that.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, I trust him in that regard. I love him out of the back end of the bullpen. You've seen other teams do it, right? The Dodgers used to do it with Kershaw, have him come out on short rest, just pitch an inning or two at the end of the game. Randy Johnson did it when he was with the Diamondbacks. So it's like it's doable. Now, I'm not saying Ranger Suarez is Clayton Kershaw or Randy Johnson, but
right. But I understand
with top of the line starters,
yeah. And listen, you're in the month of September, they've only lost 3 times, considering how poorly they were playing throughout the month of August. To see them be able to kind of turn it around last night. Talk about Harper, because Harper has been struggling with the power, but not like his splits over the last couple of games. He's still getting on base. He's still driving in runs. But you saw last night a little bit of glimpse into potentially the power. I know that there was some reports about him with the elbow not feeling like 100%, but at this point, there's really nothing to do other than to just play through it and kind of deal with it on the back end of the season. Talk to me about Harper right now.
Yeah, I mean, even though the power wasn't there from a home run standpoint, it was like he was still hitting doubles. Like he was still being a productive hitter for most of that, month and a week or two long homerless stretch. So he's been pretty good. The news came out about his wrist and elbow and everything, and I'm kind of like, that's maybe a little bit concerning, but he doesn't seem concerned. The team doesn't seem concerned. So, maybe it's just typical wear and tear. But there's a few times where he would swing and miss and he would like grimace afterwards. I'm like, is this more serious than, because obviously, he swings so forcefully all the time too. So it's like, is that something we should be a little bit more concerned about? But he's, when he's making contact, he's hitting the ball hard. I really hope that yesterday was kind of like the opening of the floodgates for him. Because he doesn't usually go that long without hitting home runs, and he had a couple close ones. He had the one in what was the one that hit off the top of the wall? Was that it wasn't Toronto.
In Tampa? Was that
Tampa? Yeah, it was Tampa. there was a couple of them anyway, like where he was getting close, but the first one he hit yesterday was like Bedlam with a bank type shot, right? But the second one he hit, that was a screamer. So it was good to see that, and I'm really hoping that that's kind of the start to a power filled postseason for him, because when Bryce
listen,
when Schwarber hits home runs, like they're majestic. When Bryce hits them, they're always in like the biggest moment. And there's a difference between a Schwarber bomb and a Bryce bomb. But when Bryce does it, especially in the postseason, it's just like it's something magical about it.
I mean, some of the Schwarber stuff is wild. It's wild to see how violent that swing is and how quick it is. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that, like, throughout this last couple game, the stretch of games, he sets the MLB record for, leadoff home runs in a season with 14. The fact that you have that at the top of your lineup, right? And I think there's a lot of, and I don't want to disrespect anybody who has watched the game for a long time, but there's a lot of people who live in the era of your traditional leadoff hitter and what they view as like the guy that gets on base, the guy that, steals bases. He's not that guy, but he's also wildly productive in that spot. Like the fact that, like, he's the guy that you want to get the most opportunities at the plate because he has the opportunity to disrupt the game from the very first pitch. And you've seen that. And some of his stuff, man, just the things into the shots into the second deck, the ones to center field that are going into the bullpen, just wild to see, man, how productive he is. But to go back to Bryce, right, in the last 15 games, he's got 22 hits, he's got 5 walks, but he's only struck out 9 times in the last 55 games. Or last 15 games. Like I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that production. I'm good because in that last 15 game stretch, he's hitting 400.
Mm-hmm.
He's slugging 673. Like I'm good with that. That's production that I can ride in the middle of this lineup when he's hitting behind Trey Turner. He's hitting in front of, Alec Boehm's going to come back probably. He's doing a rehab stint right now, but he's probably coming back Monday or Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get Sosa back middle of this week, probably Tuesday, Wednesday. You're going to put Boehm back in the middle of that lineup. The production that you've gotten from Castellanos in this season. I can't even say in this last stretch. He's been one of your best, most consistent hitters throughout the entire season. I know that they're going to get, Austin Hayes back sometime in late September, but that was a deadline deal that you thought you were going to get a lot more out of that guy than you really have.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Unfortunately, it's been mostly like injury type stuff, so I really don't think we've gotten to actually see the real Austin Hayes. I'm not saying he's going to be a huge difference maker, but he could definitely be a solid role player on this team just from seeing his past numbers and everything, especially against lefties. But yeah, I mean, I think they're in a good spot. And like you said, with the way the lineup's constructed and getting some of these guys back, it's only going to help things, right? I mean, nothing against. We've actually gotten production from a lot of our guys who were midseason call-ups, right? Like Weston Wilson has had his share of games. Cal Stevens had his share of games. Buddy Kennedy now having some of his share of games. So it's like they're filling in fine for when Boehm's out and when Sosa's out, but you're obviously getting these guys back is just a nice injection in the lineup. Like you don't want to trust nothing against those guys, but I don't necessarily want to see a Cal Stevenson or Buddy Kennedy at bat in October later on. No. If for what they're doing right now, though, hey, they're getting the job done. They're making the most of it, and that's why you need these depth type guys, right? Like it just shows how important that is for everything. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm excited to get Boehm back. I'm wondering if the timeout, because he was kind of in a little bit of a funk when he got hurt. He was kind of showing some some bad demeanor on the field. Like you could tell he was visibly frustrated.
Yeah.
Which we hadn't really seen from Bohm in a couple of years because he's had some success. But hopefully that time off, now he's able to kind of reset and come back and start hitting the ball again, because he was striking out a lot leading up to that injury.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. But I think, you look to get him back and get him right. And you've got the games to be able to do it. Right. You've got until the end of September. So you've got 2 weeks to be able to, start rolling these games out and be able to be really productive before the playoffs start. And, if the magic number is 7, the race to clinch that top spot in the NL. I know they're 2 games up on the Dodgers right now. Like 1 game, 2 games.
It's 2 or 3 actually, because the Dodgers just lost again last night. I was
looking here.
I was looking this morning, and then now I totally forgot.
So
with the Braves,
the Phillies are 89 and 59, and then
so it's 2
you're
games,
right. 2 games. The Dodgers are 87, 61. Yeah. So listen. I think the more that you have, the more advantages that you can put in your pocket going into this playoff race. I'm really excited to see what this could potentially look like.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the whole. I'm going to talk about the whole incident with Castellanos getting hit, right? Because to set that up, they had I'm sure I'm not breaking any news here, right? Most of the people that are listening or are going to listen back probably saw this in real time, but it's late in the game. The guy that came in from the bullpen is getting hit around, gives up the lead. And Castellanos kind of gives him, he's up after Harper, is on second base. I can't think of a reason why. Like, you're just upset. You're just in your feelings. But I have to say, did you see the breakdown, the lip reading breakdown from John Boy about this?
I saw bits and pieces of it. Yeah, it was.
It's a ride, man. It's 12 minutes long, but it is a really good it's a really good breakdown. They even zero in on some of the fans sitting in there, like what they were
really?
saying.
I because it's so long, funny. I didn't watch the entire thing, but just talk about that going into what this says about this team and the camaraderie of these guys. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. These guys all have each other's back. I think in terms of like clubhouse chemistry, and maybe it's recency bias, but I think it's some of the best that we've probably ever seen on with this team, and I think that's a big reason why they didn't make any big moves really over the offseason or during the trade deadline. Right? I think you got a combination of 2 things there. You have Dombrowski and company saying this team's already good enough. And then you also have them kind of that back part of it saying, like, we don't want to move any of the guys that are keys here. And I think from a fan standpoint, it's frustrating because you want to see the best players on your team. But I think also from not being in the clubhouse and not really seeing how much it affects things, I think that can kind of frustrate some fans. It's like, well, why are they standing pat with all these things? But realistically, I think that's a big part of it. They wanted to bring back that pretty much the same group. But yeah, I mean, the way Bryce, as soon as that pitch hit Castellanos, he's coming up behind the pitcher, and he's I saw his interview after the game, basically saying he used the word loser. I think he wanted to use a different word, but he said I don't want to be a loser and hit him from behind. If he turned around, he's like, all right, let's go, but I'm not going to hit him from behind. But yeah, just seeing the interviews afterwards were funny. Like Castellanos is always always one of the most fascinating interviews you'll see from this Phillies team. But he basically said, we knew that this was a possibility. He's I know the excuse from the Rays was that it was a changeup that got away from him. Turns out it was a 96-mile-an-hour changeup that got away from him. So that, to me, that seems like it might have been a little more intentional. Kevin Cash came over to Castellanos the next day and basically apologized, cleared the air. It seemed like things were fine. Yeah, the one thing I will say, when he threw at him, he threw. If you're a pitcher and you're going to throw at someone, he threw where you're supposed to, right? You hit him in the back or in the butt, not up by the head. So it's one of those things you don't really see it that much in baseball anymore, right? It's kind of been more policed, but yeah, so it's good to see that though, because I think it kind of fires up our squad a little bit, which is good to see.
It was good to see that there was a little bit of life, right?
Mhm.
Like not that this team's not that the vibes are not in a really bad spot right now, but it's good to kind of have that like that fiery reminder that like if something goes down, everybody's kind of got each other's back. And the one thing I was trying to find out while you were talking, but like they had the someone had put out like a pitch chart of all of those like all of the pitcher all of his pitches where he's thrown that changeup.
Hmm.
And like every single one of them is like somewhere in and around the strike zone.
Hmm.
And then that one particular pitch is the only one that he's thrown all season that's been like wildly outside the strike zone. It
Right.
was kind of like, all right, like just own it, right? Like
Yeah.
just be like, you know what? I was in my feelings. I was kind of pissed. I just was like, whatever.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
exactly
to
what
me
it
was like, come on. But you're right. I think that the idea that this team has each other's backs and is will like the immediate the shots of the bench where everybody's kind of like literally just dropping everything. And I had to explain to my kids, like they watch the games with me, but like my kids are like, Dad, why are they running out from the outfield? Like, and I'm like,
Yeah,
oh well, those are the
that's
guys
fine.
in the bullpen. I'm like, they're like, are they gonna get in a fight? Like, what are they doing? And I'm like, well, they might.
Maybe.
Well, why? Well, the one guy got hit with the pitch. That's it. And I'm like, all right, it's a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah,
Like for me to try to explain it, like the guy's upset because he's getting hit, and then my wife is like, "What? Isn't that what the hitter? That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to get hit." And the guy was like, "Yeah, but the guy's pissed that they're hitting him." And she's like, "It's so fucking stupid. None of this makes sense." She's like, "It's baseball," and I'm like, "You're right, but like." This is what happens when these dudes that get paid millions of dollars, someone kind of puts their talent in perspective, and especially on a team, when you look at the Rays, right, and the Rays are the seventh team in the wild card, like they're essentially out of it. They're 5.5 games out of that last wild card, so they're not playing for anything. So like they're just trying to play out the last couple weeks of the season. I'm just it's hard to explain to someone who doesn't follow it as intently to be able to say like these are all the extenuating factors that kind of feed into why this guy was like, yeah, fucking, I'm just going to throw it at the guy.
yeah. And I think, from another perspective, like from watching the game and then just seeing some of the stuff that did happen during that brawl or, whatever, scuffle, whatever you want to call it. There's some other really funny things that happened. I really wish there was a camera in the tunnel, because did you see Strahm out there in his shorts and tank top after he already pitched?
Okay.
So that means he was already showered and everything. I wanted to see the video of him running out of that tunnel so bad. That's the only thing I wanted to see.
There's gotta be some kind
There's
of
gotta be
like
something.
we've seen the videos where the guys are pissed and they're playing whack-a-mole with the wall. We've seen those down the tunnel shots. Like him, I got to imagine he's like mid-change, like throwing on his slides and like whatever t-shirt
He's
he can
definitely
grab,
just got the game on back there and just
right?
Yep.
And just made like a beeline in the slides out to. I'm like, that's just, it's incredible. But my daughter goes, Dad, is this one of those? These are called the hold me back fights. And I'm like, you're right. Like, because I was trying to tell them, I'm like, they're probably like the odds of them actually fighting are probably not as great.
Right.
But I was like, this is like the one I call them hold me back fights, because it's like, oh well, they want everyone to see that they want to fight, but they really don't want to fight. They want their teammates to kind of just like stand in front of them and scream and yell. I was like, but it could turn into that. You never know.
Exactly. Like Bryce is such an intense dude. Like I really think like in the heat of the moment, he would throw some swings, but like, notice Marsh like grabbed him and was like pulling him away. Cause once you throw a punch, there's a suspension coming. So, it's like, you got to watch out for that stuff. Cause Bryce is way too important to lose down this stretch here. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that happens in baseball. It's entertaining at the time. I wasn't actually like, I mean, it happens. Pitchers are going to hit guys. This was obviously intentional, but I don't think it negatively, it didn't negatively affect the Phillies at all. In fact, I think it actually had some positive value to it. So, I wasn't even angry in the moment necessarily. Like there's certain times like it's like, oh man, you're hitting my guys. Like, come on, you get as a fan, you get upset. I'm like, I'm not even upset because they handled it perfectly, right? Like they showed they were pissed. They, no one got suspended, no one got in trouble. It kind of all worked out. So,
yeah, it's kind of wild. There was a Luis Arise stat that I wanted to run by you.
I think I know which one.
You know what I'm talking about?
Is the strikeout since the All-Star break?
It is.
Yeah, it's insane.
It is kind of wild. I think
right?
He's got 2 strikeouts.
Yeah.
Since the All-Star break, and there were, and I'm trying to find it right now, and I can't. This is like really bothering me because I thought I had like bookmarked it, but there's there's like. I'm just going to throw it out there. There's like 100+ guys that have 2 or more strikeouts in a game since the All-Star break.
Yeah.
He's got 2 since the All-Star break.
Yeah, I think I saw something where like the next closest guy was at like 31 or something like that. So it wasn't even like it's not even like the next closest guy is like 10, which would still be like, significantly more. But yeah, it's he's one of those players where from like an average standpoint and just contact standpoint, he's so good. But if you actually look at now again, this is going to maybe rub some people the wrong way because, he is an average hitter and all that stuff. But if you look at like all of his actual metrics, because of the way he hits, he's actually not that valuable. However, to a team, but like he would be a good role player for a team. Like in this Phillies lineup, I would love to see a guy who you can always rely on to make contact and not strike out. So I'm not taking anything away from Arise, but like he's not a guy you want to build your lineup around because he's going to get on base, but you need guys to then not knock him in. But not again, that stat where he's especially in today's game where strikeouts are kind of just like accepted. Striking out twice in 2 months is very impressive.
Yeah, so he's had. I'm trying to pull it up now, but he's got like that's a Tony Gwynn stat.
Yeah, something like incredible like that. Yep.
Like I remember one of the ones we were talking about was he had like Tony Gwynn had like 18 strikeouts for like this like multiple season stretch. Like it's just it's wild stuff, man. But you're right though. I think to put him in a lineup now, listen, the lineup that they've got on paper should be a lot more productive than they actually are, though.
It's AL Central. Every lineup out there is boring.
It's the truth, man.
I'm just like I can't get behind a single team. Like the Guardians, okay, Jose Ramirez is fun to watch. I guess the Nailers can like show some power and everything. But the Royals actually are somewhat exciting this year, but actually more so, I think, from like a pitching standpoint. But I don't know what it is. I just like if there's like a Sunday night game and it's like Guardians Twins, I'm gonna probably watch something else. Like I for whatever reason, that is just like the most. I think I've said it before when we were talking about like immaculate grid and stuff like that. But for some reason, it's such a boring division. The Twins are just such a boring team to me.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, it's
and they're not bad. Like that's the thing; they're not even a bad team. But I'm just like, I just want nothing to do with them.
Yeah, and when I'm looking at the playoffs, right, like the NL wild card is essentially down to 4 teams, right? You've got San Diego, Arizona, and then you've got the Braves and Mets. Is essentially where you're at, right? The Cubs are 6 games behind the Mets, so that's essentially you would need Atlanta or New York to like lose every single game,
right?
To be able to kind of out of those wild card teams, right? You're probably gonna one of those teams is gonna have to go out and play. They're gonna probably go and play Milwaukee, and then you might have an NL. Now, can they do the in division games in that first round? Is that still a thing?
I think so. Yeah, because like last year, remember the Phillies started off the first 2 series. It was Miami and Atlanta.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, now it's based on just seeding.
Okay. I couldn't remember if that was because that was a thing for a while where they wouldn't.
I think maybe like early, like I think it went away though when they brought in the second wild card team, whatever year that was.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if it works out right now the way it sits, right, you would have the Phillies and Dodgers, at the top, and then that first round you would have Milwaukee and Atlanta. Which, if those two teams match up, I like the fact that one of those teams, you're going to take one of those two teams off the board right away. And then you would have San Diego and Arizona. And if you've got if you're going to get a second chance at being able to, kind of match up against one of those two teams, the only thing that I would be hesitant about in one of those two matchups is the bullpen with the Padres.
Yeah, the Padres bullpen is crazy good. However, I don't know what it is about Arizona, but it's not even from the postseason last year. It's more so even from the regular season this year. Like we just, for whatever reason, do not match up well against them. I think they've actually taken a step back from last year too. Like Gallen hasn't been quite as good as he was. I mean, they've been okay, but their lineup is really what's the scariest, I think. But for some reason, we don't match up well against them, and I don't think you have Musgrove, but San Diego's pitching staff and lineup don't necessarily scare me as much as Arizona. But you're right. If their starter gets taken out, they have like three guys at the back of that bullpen who could all be like top closers on other teams around the league.
Yeah.
So their bullpen is stacked, and it is something that would be concerning. And it's one of those things, I don't know if there's a right answer for ever saying this because, last year, if you would have told me we were going against Arizona in the championship series, I'm like, all right, World Series, here we come. But obviously that didn't happen. So like, you never know what team's going to get hot or what team you're going to struggle against or have success against when it comes to the postseason because the game just kind of changes a little bit on you. So I don't know if there's necessarily a team that like I want to face more so, but I think if I had to pick, I'd almost rather take our chances against San Diego in a series like that.
Yeah, I think you have the opportunity, and to go back, not to open old wounds, but like not only did you think that was the case coming into that series with Arizona, but you also were coming back 3-2 with your two best pitchers lined up at home. You had two shots at it, and they essentially just started to pitch you backwards and be able to, just slow the game down. And for whatever reason, they could not stop swinging and missing at pitches that were like all over the place. So I think to be able to get that opportunity to be able to get back to maybe have a little bit of retribution there. But I think with San Diego to me is like, if you can get to them early and maybe essentially, you put up a really crooked number early, like you can put a 5 spot on them in the first inning, or you put up 6 in the first 2 innings. The more you can do that, and this lineup has the potential to be able to do that, the more you can do that, the more that kind of minimizes those guys at the back end. Because essentially you can have that stuff at the back end be able to not have the opportunity to be able to get to, those guys, and it makes their roles significantly less.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things. I'm thinking about their top 3 starters now. And it's like, okay, so they have Musgrove, Snell, and Darvish, right? Am I missing anyone? I think those are the top 3, right? Like,
yeah, I think so.
All of those guys have the potential to, pitch a really good game. So I think actually from a pitching standpoint, maybe actually I'd rather face the Diamondbacks, but then from an offensive standpoint, I think I'd rather face the Padres. Like they have a couple guys, like obviously you have Machado, Tatis can do some damage. Xander Bogaerts is like a weird situation. Like he started off the year horribly, broke his shoulder, came back, was hot, and I think he's kind of in another slump right now. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, but like you said, the nice thing is like with the NL, if we have that time off, right, someone's getting knocked out already. So then it's like, okay, you have time to just kind of focus on that, right? It's like you can't do anything about it. Now, last year it was kind of more in our hands where it's like, okay, I love the draw against the Marlins. And like, I think that was probably the best case scenario. And now the Braves this year, it's like, if we have to face the Braves, I would be scared facing a full healthy Braves team for the third time in a row. But this Braves team, unfortunately for baseball, is kind of a shell of itself. As much as I hate the Braves, it kind of stinks that we're beating them. The reason that we are, right? I mean, you got to imagine if they were healthy, the division lead, we might still have the division lead because we had a good season, but I don't think it's 7-8 games.
It's true. I agree. All right. So going into this last couple stretch, right? You can only imagine what's your approach to potentially get these guys some rest going into that stretch? How much do they have to secure in order to start being able to kind of like give guys days off?
I mean, I think you got to play it out until you have that home field advantage. And realistically, so division and playoffs are magic number 7. I think for the first round bye, it's 11 if I saw correctly.
I believe so.
So I mean, there's obviously like the division today, if we win, goes down to 5, right? So it's like, we're in pretty good shape there. I would think most likely if we're going to clinch, it's going to be because we have a good series next week in New York. I think if we're going to clinch the division, it'll probably be in New York sometime next weekend. But I mean, the division or the home field might not be until that Cubs series. Or maybe even if something bad happens and we don't play well in Milwaukee or up at Citi Field, like could that Washington series at the end matter? I really hope not. But I think there's also something to be said for like taking your foot off the gas at the end, because there's something to be said for momentum too. And so I don't want to just like have AAA lineups all 3 games in Washington. Like I want these guys to have something to kind of play for, because I think when we see that happen, and especially then if they get that extended time off during the wild card series, like you could lose a lot of momentum going into that. And I think we saw that with the Braves last year. Like they clinched so early that they really had nothing to play for like the last like week of the season, plus that time off. And Braves fans, whether they're right or wrong, may have a point where it's like, okay, their team didn't really play a meaningful game in almost 2 weeks. It's like, I think, that can hurt a team's mentality coming back in. Like, the pro is they're healthy, rested, and you have one less series to play, right? But again, I'm all in on the home field advantage and skipping that wild card series. But I want our starters to still play at least a little bit of some meaningful games heading into the postseason still.
No, I agree. And I think the fact that you're still going to be playing for that number 1 seed really kind of solidifies that, right? Like you get that opportunity, and you're right. The idea that, you want to get guys days off, but like you don't need the entire team getting days off, because that division series is not scheduled to start until October 5th. Right. So if you're playing your, let's just hypothetically say that things are wrapped up, in and around, the 25th, the 27th, right? The end of the Cubs series, beginning of the Nats series.
That's over a week.
You're not going to play a meaningful game for over a week. And as much as you can, play those simulated games at CBP where, you bring up the Reading Phillies, you bring up the AAA squad, and you let them kind of like, play each other. Mm-hmm. There's never a time where it's going to simulate, right? So I think, but I do think, to go back to something that we talked about, to kind of put a bow on all this, you have a team that has essentially the genetic makeup to be able to have that intensity and know when the lights are going to be bright, to be able to kind of know when to turn it on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the team has that makeup. They have the experience now. And I also think, starting like game 1 at home and just like feeding off the energy, because it's going to be rocking in there. Like it always is. I mean, it is right. It was for like Wednesday, August games. Like, I mean, it'll be rocking in October.
I mean, listen,
I think this team
yesterday afternoon, prime example, right? There's not an empty seat in the house. Even when the game was 4-0, the one home run turns everybody's volume back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's it really can be said, and how one little thing can change. Like so I was at the Bedlam at the Bank game, and I was actually just talking about this the other day. It's like for most, it was rainy, it was cold, the offense stunk for a majority of the game. So like if they lose that game, I look back and be like, that was one of the most miserable Phillies games I've ever been at. But just because of the Bryce homer in the eighth, it's like that's now one of the best Phillies games I've ever been at. So it's like it's crazy how like one swing or one thing that happens can kind of change how a crowd, the energy of the crowd. Because I'll tell you, like it was quiet in there for a while. Like everyone was cold, everyone was wet. It's like this is not that fun. And then you kind of get that momentum going, and then all of a sudden it's like that place was mayhem after that final out, and the parking lots were nuts. It was crazy. So it's crazy how like you said, like yesterday, the Bryce home run kind of gets the crowd back into it. Like in the postseason, every single move is amplified, right? Like I was at the Brett Myers when he took like the 9-pitch walk game against CC Sabathia that led to the Victorino Grand Slam, and it's crazy like how each like you never hear a crowd like get so into each pitch as it happens. Like I still remember like the noise just amplifying a little bit for that Myers at bat. And then obviously the icing on the cake was the Victorino home run, but it does make such a difference in October when you're kind of hanging on every single pitch and everything just means that much more.
All right, Eric, final thoughts. What are your thoughts? Because my guess is that you and I will probably reconvene somewhere in that the end of the month.
So we'll be
around the 29th. So we'll know exactly where we stand. We'll know, who the potential matchups are. Give me some final thoughts going into these last couple of weeks.
I think, you just have to, business as usual. You're close. Like, let's get that magic number down to 5 today to clinch the division. Let's not ease up and play these last few weeks like you have something more to play for, right? Like at this point, I think the postseason is an inevitability, right? Like they're in pretty much, but it's just like don't rest on your laurels. Like keep that going, get momentum, because I firmly believe that the hottest team entering the postseason is the one that's going to go the farthest. And we saw that last year with the Diamondbacks. The Phillies were the better team on paper. The Diamondbacks won. So go in with momentum. And just get ready to rock and roll, because we're ready for our 3rd consecutive postseason here.
That's right. And listen, I'm here for. I need another. Not my wife's asleep right now, but I need another T-shirt. Right? I need that division. I need that division clinching T-shirt first. I need the NL T-shirt second. I need the World Series T-shirt third. I'm sure she's probably going to tell me I got to get rid of stuff, but let's be honest.
You just hide it until
it just right. Like it's just it comes, it goes right. 100%. All right. Listen, enjoy the weather. It's fall. Yeah. It's a great time, right? We got our first glimpse of Matvey Michkov in a Flyers jersey. We got the Eagles opening up the link on Monday night with the Nick Foles retirement. You got the Phillies going into the playoffs, man. It's a great time to be a Philly sports fan. So enjoy, go Phils, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Go Phils.
Go Phils.
Hey, listen to this guy. Tell me how you're feeling here. You're screaming.
I am stoked, baby.
You're screaming like it's still the game going on.
We're talking about the fightings here. The fightings. Said.
Should.
Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.